Welcome. The material we're exploring today is it's a custom collection of sources centered on a really tragic case. It's a case that, when it finally emerged into the national consciousness, it exposed some heartbreaking and, frankly, often fatal vulnerabilities within our child protective services systems.
It did.
This focused analysis concerns the life, the abuse, and ultimately the murder of Harmony Montgomery.
And it is so essential for us to approach this material with the required sobriety. We're not just, cataloging a personal tragedy here. We have to treat it as a critical case study in systemic failure and procedural malpractice.
Right.
Our mission is clear. It's to extract the critical facts, the timeline of legal proceedings, and I think most importantly, to really analyze the institutional issues that are illuminated by these sources. We need to understand where and how the system failed in its most fundamental duty.
Okay, let's unpack this journey through the source material. We are discussing Harmony Renee Montgomery. She was born on June 7, 2014. Her life was tragically cut short, we now know, sometime around 2019. The core facts are just devastating. She was an American child murdered by her own biological father, Adam Montgomery, in Manchester, New Hampshire.
The context here is everything. It really informs the entire analysis we're about to do. This specific outcome, her murder, it followed a truly profound series of missed signals and systemic failures. The sources repeatedly highlight that Harmony was killed after a Massachusetts judge awarded custody to Adam Montgomery.
The very person who would go on to kill her.
The very same individual, someone who had a minimal history with her and, importantly, an extensive criminal record. This custody transfer in 2019, that is the definitive catastrophic hinge point in this entire story.
And just to bring us briefly to the outcome,
Yeah.
so you know the scope of the legal closure that was eventually sought. Harmony was legally declared dead very, very recently, on March 12, 2024.
And that declaration, it really marked the end of a long, painful legal search for closure for her family. Adam Montgomery was charged, and he was convicted on February 22, 2024, of second-degree murder.
And the sentence.
His sentencing on May 9, 2024, resulted in 45 years to life in prison. But, the enduring legacy of the case is its immediate and intense ripple effect. It sparked these immediate calls for systemic reform, which is precisely why the details of her early life and those institutional reports are so critical to understand.
So let's begin right at the start. At Harmony's birth in 2014, she was born to Crystal Sorey and Adam Montgomery, though the sources are clear that they were separated at the time of her birth.
Yes, and that immediate context of separated parents, it really set the stage for instability right from day one.
And the sources reveal specific vulnerabilities were present from the absolute moment of her birth.
They do. Harmony was partially blind in her left eye, which meant she had special needs. She required consistent, elevated care and attention that a stable environment provides. Furthermore, that instability, it was immediately flagged by authorities.
How soon?
Within days of her birth. Not weeks, not months, days. Multiple reports of alleged neglect were filed with the Department of Children and Families, or DCF. So this wasn't a failure that developed later on. The state was aware of immediate concerns right from the very beginning.
And that awareness led quickly to state intervention, as it should. She was placed into foster care at just 2 months old.
That's right.
The documentation confirmed she spent the next 4 years rotating through DCF custody and various foster homes. She was never stabilized with her biological parents during this entire period.
And that 4-year period from late 2014 to 2018 is just crucial to understanding the final outcome. She was placed with several dedicated foster parents, including Tim and Michelle Raftery are mentioned by name.
Okay.
This prolonged custody was necessary because her biological mother, Crystal Sorey, who the sources confirm was struggling with drug addiction and recovery issues, she ultimately and permanently lost custody of Harmony and her other child in 2018.
So for 4 full years, the state held primary legal and protective responsibility for Harmony.
They were the primary authority in her life. The buck stopped with them.
And here is where the narrative takes that deeply tragic turn, which is, it's still studied today as an institutional error of massive proportions, the controversial custody transfer that happened in 2019. Despite this lengthy state involvement, Massachusetts Judge Mark Newman awarded full custody of Harmony to her father, Adam Montgomery.
And the sources reveal a discrepancy here that investigators later found, frankly, inexcusable. Adam Montgomery had been incarcerated for the vast majority of Harmony's early years. The sources stated unequivocally, up to the very moment he was awarded full custody of this child, he had spent only 20 hours with her.
20 hours.
20 hours, and all of them on supervised contact visits. Just think about that for a second. Placing a vulnerable child with special needs, a child who had been in what was described as stable foster care for 4 years, into the full custody of a near stranger who had spent years incarcerated.
20 hours is less than a single full day of contact, spread out over 4 years. How did the system even begin to rationalize or legally execute a decision that carried such an immense, obvious risk? This is where the structural issue lies, isn't it?
It connects directly to the legal philosophy surrounding child welfare in many states, which, it often prioritizes parental reunification above almost all else, even when the evidence of a parent's fitness is thin, or in this case, deeply concerning.
So there's a pressure to reunify families.
An immense pressure, the sort that suggests there's this pressure placed upon juvenile court judges to clear reunification dockets, and that often tilts the scale toward the biological parent, unless the state presents an absolutely overwhelming case against them. Judge Newman's decision, as controversial as it was, likely operated within a system that's designed to give the biological parent a chance.
Even when the risk profile was, as you said, profoundly high.
Profoundly high. And that's due to Adam's criminal history and just his complete lack of a relationship with Harmony.
So this wasn't just one judge making a poor assessment. It was potentially a systemic bias toward reunification that overlooked clear, blinking red light danger signals.
Precisely. And the subsequent review confirmed that the oversight was both judicial and bureaucratic. The later report from the Office of the Child Advocate, the OCA, they conducted a very detailed review, and their findings are absolutely damning regarding the institutional failure on the DCF's part.
Let's really detail those findings. What specific procedural protocols did the DCF skip or fail to complete that allowed this disastrous transfer to proceed?
The OCA report zeroed in on the specifics of procedural negligence. First, the DCF failed to complete an adequate, thorough assessment of Adam Montgomery's suitability as a parent.
And what does adequate assessment mean in this context?
Well, an adequate assessment, as it's defined by established child protective protocols, involves a number of things. It means multi-state background checks, which is critical here, given Adam's history. It means mandated substance abuse testing. It means psychiatric evaluations and comprehensive, unannounced home studies to verify the safety and the stability of the environment.
And the DCF just didn't do that.
The OCA report concluded that the DCF either executed these steps inadequately or they skipped critical components entirely. That means they failed to build a comprehensive picture of Adam's risk. They were flying blind.
So procedural negligence opened the door. But the DCF also failed to mount a strong legal defense against the transfer. Right, that was another finding.
That is the second and equally fatal error that was identified by the OCA. They noted that the DCF also failed to present a strong, evidence-based legal case to oppose placing Harmony into her father's care.
So when you have an insufficient assessment and weak legal opposition in court,
where the judge is already, as we said, predisposed toward reunification, the pathway for a dangerous outcome is just wide open.
this is the paper trail that reveals exactly why this case resonates so deeply for those of you listening. It wasn't some unavoidable tragedy. It was the result of a succession of procedural mistakes that placed Harmony directly in danger. It put her fate into the hands of an individual the state had barely evaluated and who had spent years incarcerated.
The failure here wasn't in judging the future, it was in documenting the present. The OCA findings show that the necessary administrative and legal barriers that are designed to protect children were simply not utilized effectively in this interstate custody transfer process. And that turned Harmony from a child in state care to a child placed directly into the path of harm in a new jurisdiction.
Following that catastrophic custody decision in 2019, Harmony was moved from Massachusetts to New Hampshire to live with Adam. Let's look at the environment she was immediately moved into. Adam was living with his wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their 2 young sons.
Right.
And the sources immediately identify this as a severely unstable household.
The sources paint a grim picture of profound dysfunction. It's rooted in deep substance misuse issues. Both Adam and Kayla struggled with serious addiction problems. And beyond the immediate chaos that addiction creates, the financial instability meant extreme deprivation for the children.
And there's a chilling fact in the documentation about that.
There is. The documentation specifically states that Adam and Kayla were reportedly paying their drug dealer using their SNAP food stamps.
That specific detail about diverting food assistance, It speaks volumes about the priorities in that house and the immediate neglect Harmony faced. I mean, if they are selling or trading federal supplemental nutrition assistance program benefits for drugs.
And then the family, including 3 very young children, simply would not have had enough adequate food or resources. It's a snapshot of immediate neglect concerning the most basic necessities of life: water, food, shelter.
And sadly, that neglect rapidly escalated into active physical violence.
Almost immediately. Harmony, already vulnerable because of her special needs, was subjected to beatings and abuse by her father almost as soon as that custody transfer was complete.
And we know there was specific witness testimony regarding this abuse that surfaced later during the investigation, which confirms the abuse started very early on.
Yes. Adam's uncle, Kevin Montgomery, came to visit from Florida in 2019. He noticed Harmony had a severe black eye.
A family member saw it.
A family member saw it. And when Kevin had the courage to question Adam about the injury, Adam's alleged response was a chillingly casual acknowledgement of physical violence. He reportedly told his uncle that he bashed her around.
A statement like that is not just an admission of violence, it's an indicator of a complete lack of shame or any fear of consequence. And what happened when Kevin tried to sound the alarm?
Well, the sources confirm Kevin contacted child protective agencies to report both the visible abuse he had witnessed and Adam's shocking admission. This was a direct signal to the system from a credible source. But critically, the sources then state that nothing came of that report. Nothing.
Why? I mean, we have to ask why.
Well, given the interstate complexity Harmony moving from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, there may have been jurisdictional confusion, which is a classic systemic gap. Or, and this is more frequent, a failure of prioritization due to overwhelming caseloads, which leads to a report being dismissed or inadequately followed up on. Either way, it represents a devastating missed opportunity to intervene.
As the year progressed into late 2019, the family's instability just got worse, leading to severe displacement. The Montgomerys were evicted from their home.
And this transition marks the point where their living conditions became wholly unsustainable. They began living in their car.
Yeah.
You have to imagine a scenario where the stress, the lack of privacy, the lack of basic hygiene facilities, it would have severely traumatized 3 young children.
And the sources highlight the dangerous reality of that situation.
They do. They show Adam and Kayla continue to abuse drugs in the car while living with their young children who were essentially trapped in the back seat.
That kind of extreme stress homelessness combined with active addiction, all in those tight quarters, it's almost guaranteed to increase tensions and act as a precursor to escalating violence.
The sources definitively link the displacement to the severity of the violence. It was in this hyper-stressful, unstable environment living in the car that Adam repeatedly beat Harmony.
And the specific trigger for this escalation, according to the sources, it related to a vulnerable side of Harmony that was likely made so much worse by the trauma of homelessness itself.
Absolutely. The beatings were triggered because Harmony was struggling with bathroom accidents, specifically bedwetting. And the sources clarify that this problem had not started until they became homeless.
So it was a symptom of the trauma.
It suggests the immense trauma, the stress, the instability of living in a car directly contributed to her struggles. And Adam then chose to punish her for it with extreme violence. Instead of seeking help for a traumatized child, Adam responded with escalating brutality.
So the sources placed the event of Harmony's death in late 2019. While the family was still existing in this highly unstable, car-bound state. We need to detail the immediate context of the murder based on the testimony that emerged later on.
The specific context that was provided by witnesses, namely Kayla Montgomery, is chillingly precise. The sources indicate the death occurred one morning while the family was traveling to a methadone clinic.
So a routine trip.
A routine trip. And during that drive, Adam Montgomery went into a sudden, violent rage and beat Harmony to death. This was a violent, fatal assault that took place in a small, confined space while the other children were present. It just underscores the severity of Adam's temper and the immediate danger he posed to everyone.
And tragically, the subsequent actions confirmed the profound coldness and desperation of the parents. Adam later confessed to abusing her corpse, which became a factor cited later in the legal process to declare her legally dead.
The actions taken immediately following her death. They speak not just to desperation, but to an absolute calculated commitment to hide the crime and erase all evidence of it. This began the long and gruesome process of concealment.
It started with him hiding her body in a duffel bag.
Yes, a desperate, immediate action. But that was only the beginning. The sources reveal the cover-up became a months-long effort to completely destroy and dispose of any physical evidence. This indicates premeditation not of the murder itself, but of the obstruction of justice that followed.
That's a critical distinction.
It is. Adam and Kayla concealed her remains for several months, transporting them and attempting to destroy them. Their actions were methodical and horrifying. It started with initially freezing the body to preserve it while they figured out the next steps. This act, moving, storing, and preserving the remains of a child, it demonstrates a profound lack of respect and a sustained attempt to escape detection.
Freezing the body. And then the final extreme efforts to chemically destroy the remains. This adds a layer of morbid, almost technical detail to the sources.
It does. The sources detail the horrific attempts at disposal. Later, they thogged the body, they cut up the remains, and then they attempted to dissolve them using a chemical substance.
Lie.
Lye, or sodium hydroxide. It's a highly caustic substance used in chemistry and certain industrial processes. It is capable of breaking down organic materials. And this effort to chemically dissolve the body indicates a deliberate, calculated effort to eliminate every piece of evidence to make sure no trace was ever recoverable.
That specific detail, the months-long, meticulous attempt to erase her existence using freezing, cutting, and caustic chemicals, is why this case is so shocking. And ultimately, despite years of searching and investigation.
The sources confirm the final tragic detail of this case. Despite extensive investigation, testimony, and legal proceedings, the body of Harmony Montgomery has never been recovered. The effort to destroy the evidence was, in that one terrible sense, successful, and it forced the prosecution to rely entirely on testimonial and circumstantial evidence.
And that absence of a physical body makes securing a murder conviction legally very challenging. Yet, forensic evidence still surfaced that linked the concealment to the family. What specific physical evidence was revealed later during the trial?
The trial team performed a highly detailed forensic investigation of the properties the Montgomerys had occupied. The sources confirmed that during the legal proceedings, specific physical evidence was presented. This included blood-stained ceiling drywall from a Guilford Street property.
And that's where her remains had been hidden.
That's where the little girl's remains had been hidden during the concealment period. This specific, concrete detail tied the horrific concealment efforts back to a physical location, and it corroborated Kayla Montgomery's testimony about where the remains were stored before their ultimate disposal.
And the prosecution also utilized Adam's own words against him, correct?
Yes. While Adam refused to testify, the sources note that the prosecution utilized a phrase Adam had used to describe his actions. I F up. This simple statement, presented as an acknowledgement of guilt regarding his actions in beating and disposing of the body, it was used to underscore the severity of the crime and the subsequent calculated attempts to cover it up. It provided a small insight into his mindset following the murder.
One of the most shocking and frankly infuriating aspects of this case, and one that directly drove the calls for systemic reform, is that timeline gap. Harmony went missing around late 2019, but her absence was not officially reported until late 2021, a full 2 years later.
It's staggering.
How could a child who had been in state custody for 4 years simply vanish for 24 months without being flagged?
The delay is absolutely staggering, and it points directly to the failure of cross-state communication and follow-up. Once custody was transferred interstate from Massachusetts to Adam in New Hampshire, Harmony essentially fell off the radar of any protective tracking mechanisms.
So it was her biological mother, Crystal Sorey, who raised the alarm.
Yes, when Adam broke contact, Sorey became concerned when Adam did not bring Harmony to visit for Thanksgiving in 2021.
So she had to resort to her own devices, basically, to try and confirm her daughter's safety.
That's right. She initially questioned Adam on Facebook about Harmony's whereabouts, but Adam immediately blocked her account, which confirmed her worst fears and signaled his attempt to obfuscate.
He just cut her off.
Completely. So, having exhausted her own channels and confirming Adam was deliberately avoiding communication, Sorey then filed the missing person report for her daughter. And that finally brought the authorities in New Hampshire into the case in late 2021.
When the police finally got involved in December of 2021, what was Adam's immediate strategy for obfuscation?
Adam Montgomery attempted to immediately derail the investigation by shifting the blame. He claimed that Harmony was living with her mother, Crystal Sorey.
The very person who was reporting her missing.
The very same person. Despite having blocked Sorey and refusing to provide any proof of Harmony's well-being, it was a classic tactic of a guilty party. Confuse the issue and point the finger at the person reporting the crime.
The police realized quickly this was not a simple missing persons case, and they had to escalate the search immediately.
They did. Given the high-profile nature and the severity of that timeline gap, the Manchester Police Department held a press conference in December 2021, and they quickly started cooperating with both New Hampshire and Massachusetts authorities to widen the search.
That interstate cooperation was vital.
Vital but challenging given the initial Massachusetts custody routes and the New Hampshire location of the crime. Police specifically searched a Guilford Street property where the family was known to have lived, trying to pin down where Harmony might have last been seen or, where evidence might be concealed.
And crucial evidence confirming Adam's capacity for violence eventually came from his own family members, which added a lot of weight to the developing investigation.
Absolutely. Police interviewed Michael Montgomery, who was Adam's brother. He provided essential testimonial evidence. Michael stated that he had personally witnessed his brother's abusive nature toward Harmony. That lent undeniable credence to the reports of violence, and it really strengthened the theory that Adam was responsible for her disappearance.
So family testimony was crucial.
It was crucial in transforming the case from a missing person inquiry into a full murder investigation.
By the summer of 2022, the authorities had enough evidence, even without a body, to shift their focus definitively. They made an official declaration regarding their conclusions.
Yes. On August 11, 2022, after months of detailed forensic work and interviews, Manchester Police Chief Alan Aldenburg and New Hampshire Attorney General John Formella made a public statement confirming their conclusion. They publicly stated they believed that Harmony Montgomery was dead, and furthermore, that her father, Adam Montgomery, had murdered her.
That's a huge step to take publicly.
It was a major, unprecedented shift. It confirmed their commitment to prosecuting the case based on evidence of the crime and the concealment, even without recovering physical remains.
So let's move into the legal accountability phase, which culminated in early 2024. Adam Montgomery was charged with second-degree murder and falsifying physical evidence. That latter charge was specifically related to the attempts at destruction and concealment.
That's right. The trial commenced on February 8, 2024, in the Superior Court in Hillsborough County. And it's important for you to understand the defendant's status at this time. Adam was already incarcerated. He was already serving a substantial 30-year sentence after a prior conviction for an unrelated gun crime the previous year.
So he was already a convicted felon with decades ahead of him in prison.
Correct.
And he showed profound disrespect for the proceedings by refusing to attend his own murder trial. What were the legal ramifications of his absence?
His refusal to attend was noted as a significant display of indifference and contempt, though legally it did not halt the trial. The court appointed defense attorneys, Caroline Smith and James Brooks, to represent him, while prosecutor Christopher Knowles took the case for the state.
I imagine his absence meant the jury never had to face the man accused of the crime.
Right, which can subtly shift the focus entirely onto the evidence and the testimony, which in this case may have benefited the prosecution.
A crucial and highly complex figure in this trial was Adam's estranged wife, Kayla Montgomery. Her testimony proved central to securing the conviction, but her involvement was fraught with her own legal complications.
Kayla Montgomery was a high-risk witness for the prosecution, but ultimately she was critical. She was also serving a prison sentence at the time of the trial. She had previously been convicted of perjury for lying to a grand jury about the timeline and whereabouts of Harmony.
So she was covering up the truth of the murder in the initial stages. Let's just unpack the technical complexity of her cooperation. Why did she lie initially? And what did she gain by ultimately testifying against her ex-husband?
Well, Kayla's initial perjury conviction suggested she was actively protecting Adam, or perhaps simply terrified of him. The sources imply a degree of loyalty or fear that initially kept her silent about the gruesome details.
But then she changed her story.
Her shift in testimony during the trial was part of a cooperation agreement with the state. By testifying against Adam and providing the critical firsthand details of the murder and the concealment, the freezing, the lie, the location, she essentially fulfilled her cooperation requirement. And she was potentially hoping for a reduction in her own sentence in the long run.
It was a calculated risk for the prosecution.
A huge risk, relying on a convicted perjurer. But it provided the necessary narrative structure of events that only an eyewitness could.
And what did she reveal in the stand?
She provided damning details that prosecutors needed to prove second-degree murder, which doesn't require premeditation. She confirmed Adam had been physically and emotionally abusive to both her and Harmony. Most crucially, she confirmed that he had beaten Harmony to death in December 2019.
Did she explain why she lied for so long?
She did. She specifically testified that when she was asked about her earlier lies to the grand jury, she explained she had not spoken up earlier because she still cared for him, despite the abuse and the horror of his actions. This complex emotional backdrop helped explain her delay in reporting.
So her testimony, combined with the forensic evidence, the bloodstained drywall, and Adam's confession about corpse abuse, was evidently enough for the jury to reach definitive decision.
It was. The prosecution built a very strong circumstantial case that was supported by that key testimonial evidence. On February 22, 2024, Adam Montgomery was found guilty by the jury of both second-degree murder and falsifying physical evidence.
We should briefly clarify the distinction here. Why second-degree murder rather than first-degree?
The difference really lies in intent. First-degree murder requires premeditation, that Adam planned to kill Harmony. Second-degree murder, however, requires only an extreme indifference to the value of human life or an intentional act that results in death without that prior planning.
And the evidence pointed to a spontaneous act of rage.
Exactly. Given that the sources describe Adam flying into a rage in the car during a morning commute, the prosecution had a much stronger case, proving an intentional, reckless, and deadly assault rather than a planned execution. The second-degree conviction was a strategic success, given the lack of a body and the unplanned nature of the fatal assault.
And what was the final sentence delivered on the murder charge?
The specific sentence was handed down on May 9, 2024. He was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison. Critically, the judge ordered that this sentence be served consecutively with the 30-year sentence he was already serving for the unrelated weapons charges.
So the sentences are stacked.
They are stacked. This stacking of sentences effectively ensures Adam Montgomery will spend the rest of his natural life incarcerated. It guarantees the maximum accountability under the law.
And while Adam faced criminal accountability, Harmony's biological mother, Crystal Sorey, sought another critical form of legal closure for her family.
That closure came very recently. On March 12, 2024, a New Hampshire judge granted Crystal Sorey's request to have Harmony declared legally dead. This judicial declaration was critical for administrative closure, for probate, and, for grieving.
And the judge cited Adam's confession.
It specifically cited Adam Montgomery's confession to abusing her corpse as justification for the declaration. It acknowledged the reality of her death and the total destruction of her remains.
And is the legal aftermath completely concluded now, or are there civil actions still in play?
The sources indicate that Crystal Sorey is taking steps toward a planned wrongful death lawsuit. This signals that accountability, in her view, extends beyond the criminal conviction of Adam. A civil lawsuit will likely target the institutions, particularly the agencies responsible for the failed custody transfer and the ignored reports of abuse. It would seek financial damages, but, perhaps more importantly, a public acknowledgement of their negligence.
Harmony Montgomery's murder, and the fact that she was missing for 2 full years before the investigation even began, it sparked widespread outrage. The sources consistently identified this case as a major catalyst for institutional scrutiny and urgent calls for reforms of child protective systems, especially across state lines.
The central question that continues to haunt both the public and the systems involved is exactly how this little girl, who was a ward of the state for 4 years, could be entirely invisible for 2 full years after that custody transfer. The failure of protective mechanisms, of checks and balances, and of interstate reporting was absolute.
The sources really push us to look beyond the individual blame of the parents and focus back on the core failures documented officially by the Office of the Child Advocate.
Exactly. The systemic failures noted in that OCA report, the insufficient assessment of Adam Montgomery, who had only 20 hours of supervised contact, and the DCF's weak legal opposition to the custody placement. Those things form the tragic foundation of this case.
It all comes back to that.
It all comes back to that. This reflects the crucial understanding that knowledge of these specific procedural details is essential for any push toward improved child safety protocols. I mean, if DCF had performed mandatory, comprehensive, multi-state checks, Adam's unsuitability would have been clearly documented. It would have made the judge's ruling indefensible.
This exploration of sources provides a necessary, painful documentation of the bureaucratic and procedural mistakes that directly cost a young child her life. This case forces authorities to re-examine the legal pressures favoring reunification versus the clear evidence of risk.
And we have to remember that despite the criminal conviction and the sentencing, this case remains a highly unusual instance of a murder conviction that was secured without the recovery of the victim's body. The conviction rested heavily on the testimony detailing the extreme, months-long methods of concealment, the freezing, the cutting up, the dissolution of remains in lye. This fact, paired with the complete destruction of evidence, raises the essential question of accountability not just for the crime itself, but for the profound disrespect shown to Harmony's memory and her remains. It forces the public to confront the total lack of humanity in the aftermath of the murder, and it ensures the story of this systemic failure will endure.
That is a powerful and crucial point to close on. Thank you for walking us through these devastating yet necessary facts from the source material.
It was necessary to detail the context.
Thanks for listening.